Hey there friends, Martin here, and yes, it's been almost 3 years now since I've fallen in love with this world creating software called, well, World Creator. And ever since I've been waiting to start working in a new version that would improve upon some of the faults of the previous one. And guess what? It's here, introduced by this amazing short film called I Am. I mean, if this doesn't speak volumes about World Creator's abilities, then I don't know what does. How come it doesn't have more views? Probably doesn't have enough puppies in it. Anyways, it looks simply amazing, so definitely watch it. In this 3-part series, let's have a look at how to make a detailed terrain in World Creator 2022, add some textures to it, and then export everything to Blender. Before we jump in though, just a quick reminder that my Master 3D Environments in Blender course is still going strong. Recently, for example, I added chapters on geometry nodes, some stormy waves, and lightning. So yeah, if you like what you see, consider getting the course and you will support this YouTube channel as well. First off, of course, the price. In its current version, World Creator still allows you to buy a perpetual license. This costs $350. I mean, it is completely acceptable given what World Creator can do. Other than that, you can of course go the subscription route, which is $17 per month and $170 per year. So the yearly one of course amounts to less in the long run. Now, having this out of the way, this is what we're greeted with when we open up World Creator and log in into our account. What's very neat, there are now already built-in examples of various environments, so you can go in and experiment with those, learning how they were made. In our case though, let's make a new terrain. And here, this is the default blob that is created for us. Now in this tutorial, I'm not going to go through all the myriads of settings here. Instead, I just want to show you what you need to get a decent looking terrain into Blender. So just the essentials now. You can pan with your middle mouse button, zoom with the mouse wheel, and holding Alt and right mouse button rotates around the point where you've clicked. There is also the WASD movement scheme with E to go up and Q to go down. Oh, and very handy, just holding down right mouse button rotates the camera from the point of view. Now there are also some icons in here, so just the most important ones now. With this little guy, you frame your environment if you ever get lost. Fast render allows you to get rid of all the unnecessary effects to speed up the real-time rendering, while this button stops the real-time render entirely. And you will need to hit this generate button every time then. Definitely good for slower machines. The rest of the settings we don't really need to go into right now, unless you want to turn off the sun or turn on waterline, all of which has its settings in the second menu called Environment. However, in this first part, let's just focus on the first menu here called Terrain. Because this is an absolute powerhouse. It is here where you create, adjust, rotate, distort, and do all sorts of other stuff that was so awesome in the previous version of World Creator. And guess what? It is even better now. So first thing, let's focus on this global biome layer. This is basically our base layer of detail, the main one that drives what you currently see in the viewport. And one of the great things about this new version is there is sort of a wizard setup menu here in the base shape section. So let me show you a very quick workflow you can do. Just change this to dunes here, and this is way too tall, so just lower the strength. Now, of course, this is what you could easily achieve with any sort of regular noise displacement in Blender. But here's where you deploy the powerful filters World Creator offers. So click on this filters menu here, and we have all this at our disposal. But for now, let's just quickly choose this simulation section and sand. How awesome is that? Amazingly detailed sand dunes with an effect of blowing wind layering these ridges. This is definitely not something you can do in Blender, at least not so quickly and with so much detail. Of course, if you click on the sand layer, you have all these settings here, so you can change the angle of the wind, for example, its randomness, smooth out the steps, etc. All these sliders are very obvious in what they do, so most of the time all you need is to dive in and play around. On top of this, you can of course add even more modifiers. For example, sediment, mud. And just like that, we have more of a wet, sandy area with mud in between the dunes. Of course, order of these layers matters, so you will achieve slightly different results when you switch them around. The stuff on the bottom is calculated first, the one on the top afterwards. With various other modifiers, you can achieve interesting effects, and it's all so much fun to play with. For example, you can add something like craters, or even this swirl modifier, to make more of an abstract stuff with this. And of course, you can always go back to the global settings and adjust your base setting, like the strength, for example. At any time then, you can make your terrain more detailed by hitting this precision menu. Currently, with this 1 meter precision, we are working at 1K resolution level of detail. This one is 2K, and lowering the value to something like 1/4 gives you 4K detail, which is usually quite okay for midground and background landscapes. Let's not make sand dunes, however. Let's make something that gives us more options, like an island. So switch back to 1 meter precision for faster computing, and let's get rid of these filters by dragging them to the left like this. This dragging left to delete took me a while to figure out, I admit. And switch back to the base shape menu in the global layer. And now let's choose this islands preset. Now we can play around with these settings to learn what they do, but really at this stage, precise settings of these sliders are not really that important. Actually though, what you can do to help you with this process is activating the waterline in here. Now it's a bit too high, so you can adjust the water level in this menu here. And now let's get back to shaping. When you're happy with the base effect of the terrain, you can either go through the seed option to find a shape you really like. But fortunately there is a manual option to shape your terrain, and it is now much more user-friendly than it used to be. You just switch to this custom base shape menu and start shaping. Basically you just click on an area or paint select more faces and then hold down Shift. Once you do, you can go up or down, however you like. And if you scroll your mouse wheel, you can adjust the fall off of your adjustment area, something real close to proportional editing in Blender. This is so much faster and more convenient than the rigid point selection from the previous version. And let me actually deactivate the waterline for a while now to make the process a little bit more visible. I recommend taking some time to learn how to do this and really get the hang of it. But yeah, it is very user-friendly. You can of course adjust your settings for this, for example, subdivide your mesh for more precision, adjust the fall off to something smoother or sharper, even rotate or mirror. Now one thing to note, once you're done with this process, the sliders here in the global settings will not take effect anymore. However, that doesn't matter too much at this point, because this is where we start using filters. So just like we did with the dunes example, let's jump into this menu. I usually like to start with the zero edge, which ensures that there are no weird popping edges once we displace the mesh in Blender. Next up, I added some dry rocky white filter and also rocky cliffs filter, just to simulate some rocky formations on this. It is always better to think of what's first in nature. So you get a rocky foundation and over it some erosion happens due to weather effects. But before we add erosion, let me actually choose a different filter in the effects folder called smooth ridges. What I don't really like is this way the tops of my mountains are cut off. And with this modifier, it is perfect for smoothing out areas like this. However, the way it currently is, I don't like it too much. It is basically smoothing everything, all the big and little details. To change it, playing with the strength doesn't really do the trick, since it doesn't change the type of smoothing I'm after. So this is where these level strengths come into play. The way you can understand this, each of these levels is responsible for smoothing various levels of detail on your terrain. One smooths the smallest noise, while the larger values smooth the ridges and the hills. If we now only try to smooth something around level 8, you can see playing with these levels gives me exactly what I wanted, smoothing just the top ridges and leaving the small and larger detail alone. However, I really like the sharp detail here in the lower areas and especially around the water level, and I want to retain it. So that gives me another great opportunity to show a new tool, and it is this distribution rules. Something familiar from the previous versions, of course. However, the menu has changed a bit. So to add a new distribution rule, which basically limits where your effects take place, you need to click here and add from this menu. We will choose the simplest one, the height. Now it is added over the overall biome layer distribution, and we can play with the height settings in here. This height range controls the lower and upper limits where you want the effect to take place. So in my case, I want to only limit it to areas above certain height. So I will take this lower limit and push it up. So I've raised the lower limit to about this value where the top peaks are smoothed, but the lower portions have all this detail retained. And now we can proceed to adding the erosion filters we're after. Let's add first some ridged flows, which simulates this effect of flowing water across rocky ridges. Immediately, this gives me more of a mountainous look. Let's add the height distribution rule again and limit the effect only to the higher mountainous areas, leaving the lowlands more flat. Then, over it, let's add this super powerful hydraulic simulation filter, which gives these awesome looking eroded ridges to our mountains. However, these I want to only isolate to the highest peaks. So again, using the height modifier, I can do just that. And by the way, with this little number here, I can increase the fade out of the effect, making the transition slightly smoother. Something like 20 will do. Now, after the erosion, there usually comes more sedimenting, basically soil settling onto the eroded surface. So for that, I like to use this sediment fill soft with default values, and again add the height distribution rule and only limit it to these lower portions. Now I think this is already looking good, but we can play with this result some more. Upon some experimentation and looking at the various results provided by the developer, I found that this erosion soft flows with default values, but the largest level strength risen like this gives you these very nice streaks going away into the sea. You can again limit the effect only to the lower portions, but I actually left it even on the mountains for that one more level of detail. Then, since I felt there is not enough small rocky shapes on the ground, I added this dry rocky sharp filter, which took care of that. And finally, adding one more default fill soft with very low strength helped me to fill some of these sharpest eroded areas. And the best thing, I can always jump into the custom shape menu and start shaping up this terrain to achieve something more to my liking. After some playing around, I ended up with this. And of course, as always, you can go to my Patreon page and download the project files from there, including this final result. If you want, you can activate your clouds at this point and play around with their settings and the setting of the sun in this menu here. But that we will talk about in more detail in the future lessons. So, I hope you liked this first part of this new series, giving you a brief overview of my workflow inside of the new World Creator version 2022. See you in the next part, where we dive deep into the texturing of this environment. So until next time, stay creative my friends, Martin out.